welcome to a special edition of The Big Story. I'm Salma Khalik, Senior Health Correspondent for the Straits Times. We are honoured to have as our special guest tonight National Development Minister Lawrence Wong, who co-chairs the multi-ministerial task force for COVID-19. Mr. Wong, a very big welcome.
Evening, Salma.
We know you have been very busy jointly helming Singapore's response to the pandemic with Health Minister Gan Kim Yong. Now, it's been slightly more than 2.5 months since the task force was set up. Could you share some of your experiences with us?
Well, you know, Salma, this is such a rapidly changing situation. It's so fluid. It's changing day by day. So literally, we are living through times of anxiety and high stress. Right? Every day we are discussing, thinking through potential scenarios of how the virus can unfold, and then developing new measures, adjusting and updating our measures. So this is where we are. It's been 2.5 months, like you said. I remember when we first started, people were still wondering, you know, was there a need for a task force? Were we overreacting? But now we are in a completely different world, not just in Singapore, but everywhere in the world.
Sorry, you said you are meeting every day?
Well, not literally in a physical meeting, but we touch base on a daily basis, right? So either through virtual meetings or through physical meetings, we are touching base every day, going through information, going through daily updates, and then coordinating the work of the task force.
Right. So could we do a quick look back over the past 10 weeks? What do you think Singapore has done right? And what could we have done better? Now with hindsight, right? What could we have done better?
Well, with hindsight, everything can be done better.
True.
So I take the attitude that we are always looking to improve. We don't assume that we are in the perfect situation, right? And we always look to improve. We do have a good system today. It is a system for public health emergencies that was developed and built up after the painful experience of SARS. So this whole of government system has been effective. It does allow us to coordinate and integrate well across different agencies and to put in place decisions and measures in a very decisive and swift manner. And so we have been constantly looking at data. We want our measures to be based on science and evidence and to be able to move quickly in response to a very rapidly changing situation. So I think those are our strengths. Yes. But we don't take any of these for granted, and we just continue to, you know, look ahead at the situation. I'm sure after all this is over, we can do a full, what the military calls AAR, after action review. Huh? Right. And I'm sure when you look back, there will be things that can be improved, there will be enhancements made to the system. But for now, we are in the midst of a battle, so let's focus on it and get the job done.
Actually, Singapore has been lauded by many countries around the world as one of the best examples. However, there are people in Singapore itself who are asking, should we have stopped the Chinese from coming in earlier because the first 18 cases were from China? Should we have asked people to social distance a bit earlier? Would the numbers have been smaller? Now, as you say, hindsight is always perfect. So on hindsight, perhaps, going back then, if you know what you know now, would you have brought it forward?
So again, as I said, if you look at all of these measures, one of the challenges we've had to make is making decisions in consequential decisions in a very short period of time with not a lot of data and information and with very short reaction time. And these are important decisions that have impact on people's lives and livelihoods. So again, with the benefit of hindsight, certainly you could say some things could have been done faster. Perhaps some things were not even necessary. So we can always learn with the benefit of hindsight and with experience and improve decision making. There's no doubt that we are not, things can be improved. But like I said, let's deal with it going forward. Let's deal with the situation at hand.
Right. Now, the numbers around the world has been going up a lot, right? So in Singapore, they're still relatively contained. But given what's happening in the other countries, what are your greatest fears about this pandemic?
Well, we've said it before. If you look at how the virus spread so quickly, you only need one event to be a super spreader event that can cause a large, uncontrollable outbreak, and then it starts to accelerate. When it accelerates and it's out of control, it overwhelms your hospital system, and then you start to see rising mortality rates, particularly amongst the more vulnerable groups. And so that's our biggest worry. You have seen this in countries that have put in place very good precautions and have very good hospital systems, like in Korea. They have done everything right. But still, there was an uncontrollable outbreak in some of their cities. So that's our biggest fear, that even with the best of measures, even taking all the precautions that we do, and even with an excellent contact tracing system, which people call the gold standard, with all of these things, we do recognize that there are still risks, and these risks can cause significant harm to Singaporeans. So we are concerned. We are always looking day by day how the situation unfolds, looking ahead at potential risk and what we can do to mitigate some of these risks.
Does this keep you awake at night? Do you give you nightmares, for example? Do you wake up in cold sweat and say, oh my God, we've got...
So like I said, we live through anxiety and stress all the time now. Certainly for me, it's living through these few days or this past 2.5 months, and as the situation escalates, it weighs on my mind a lot more. I don't have such a peaceful sleep at night, but those are the things we have to handle, and those are important decisions that all of us, both in the task force and Singaporeans together, have to deal with collectively.
Since you were made the co-chair in January of this task force, has all these, frankly, a double portfolio, because you're still National Development Minister, right? And you still have to do your work there?
Yes, of course.
Right? And take this up on top. So has it affected your personal life, your family life at all?
Well, like I said, there's certainly more work, more stress associated with the work. I'm complying and abiding by all the safe distancing guidelines. So I work from home as much as I can too. In fact, within my ministry, we have pushed up our work from home percentage to more than 90%. I tell all my staff, non-essential meetings, we don't have to gather together. We can do teleconference and phone calls, and then more than 90% of them can work from home. So we still work through emails, through teleconferences. So as a result of all this, plus the fact that many activities and events have now been cancelled or deferred, I have, interestingly, more time at home. Right? I spend a lot more time at home now. Right? I see my wife a lot more than before. But the flip side of it is that then all of this free time is now spent thinking through, working through all the things that we have to do as part of the task force.
Right, so it's good and bad. You see her more, but your mind isn't totally on family. It's still always on what's happening.
It has to be, unfortunate. Well, that's the reality. And we have to deal with, like I said, a situation that continues to escalate worldwide. And within Singapore, we are still, in fact, we are at a very critical time of the infection curve, particularly looking at how we can manage and control the rise in locally transmitted cases, particularly the unlinked ones, which we are very concerned about.
You mentioned that we are at a critical time. Why is it a critical time now?
Well,
is it because the local unlinked cases are going up?
So it is, in a way, throughout the infection curve, it's always critical. But we are now at the phase where I think we have been able to manage and control the imported cases, isolate them, keep them in hotels by and large, and prevent the infection from these imported cases to the local community. But we do know that the virus continues to circulate within our own population. that has been the case even from the start, but it is rising now. And we see more local cases, we see more unlinked cases, which is of concern. And that is the reason why we decided last Friday to put in place all these very tight, safe distancing measures to complement the efforts of our contact tracers and to help suppress and slow down the spread of the virus. If we are able to do all of this well, I think there is a good chance that we can indeed slow it down and control the spread of the virus within Singapore. We probably won't be able to eradicate the virus entirely, but we can slow it down and manage the numbers. But if we are unable to, if we are not fully on board the safe distancing measures, if there's still non-compliance with many of these measures, we don't implement these measures well, then with the rise in numbers, I think they will overwhelm our contact tracing team. It will be very hard to track down all of these cases. And then that's why I said the likelihood of getting into the worry scenario, the worrisome scenario, or the nightmare scenario that I talked about earlier arises, and that's of concern. So that's the reason why we say this is a critical part, and we do have to work together, get all Singaporeans to understand that every person is in fact on the front line. Every Singaporean can make a difference in slowing down the spread of the virus today.
You know, taking up from that point, right, and the fact that contact tracing is important, the government has rolled out this Tracer app. Singapore has about 6 million people.
Yes.
I believe less than 1 million have picked it up.
That's right.
That's rather disappointing, isn't it?
Well, so we do want to encourage more people to take it up. To be fair, getting 1 million downloads within this short period of time is probably a record for any government app, to be fair.
Why do you say that? I thought you people have assured that our privacy will be honored, that you wouldn't be spying on us because of that.
That's right.
If that's the case, and if it's there to help beat COVID-19, I don't see why more people are not doing it.
So what I'm saying is, if you look at all that we have done for government apps, the most successful to date has been probably parking.sg, right? That's in the past, but the statistics for the download and use of Trace Together has been very good, but it's still not good enough, right? So it's still not good enough because in order for Trace Together to be effective, we need something like 3/4, or at least, if not everyone in the population to have it. Then we can really use that as an effective contact tracing tool. So we do want to put out the message to all Singaporeans, please download and turn on the app. It's not enough to just download. You have to turn on your Bluetooth function and get the app in place.
Mr. Wong, could I just turn to what happened in Parliament recently? Many people were rather surprised at the emotion you showed when you thanked the people working hard to tackle the outbreak. We'll just take a look at that clip here.
Words are not sufficient to express our appreciation for Mr. Speaker, words are not sufficient to express our appreciation for all of those who are Let me just rephrase that, repeat what I said just now. Words are not sufficient to express our appreciation for so many Singaporeans going all out to fight the virus. And I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's doing their part.
Mr. Wong, was there anything in particular that moved you to tears in Parliament?
Well, you said many people were surprised. I was caught by surprise as well, because I didn't expect the emotions to overwhelm me so strongly. And the reason it did was because even as I was delivering the speech, thinking about thanking all the people who have been working on this, the images came to my mind of the people I've met through these past weeks, the doctors, nurses, the healthcare workers at NCID, in our hospitals, in our PHPC clinics, all of them working so hard and making so many sacrifices. They all look tired, some look exhausted, but when you talk to them, they are keeping their spirits high and they are continuing to persevere. And this is just in the front line. But I've also met many people outside, this is just in the healthcare front line, but I've also met many people outside of healthcare who are also working extra hard. Because of the virus, you have our teachers in schools taking care of our children, the immigration, airlines, airport staff, taxi drivers. We've got our public officers doing so many things, contact tracing, working behind the scenes to arrange for housing. So just as I was going through that part of the speech, the thought and the images of all of these people came to my mind. And like I said, it took me by surprise too, that the emotions just came and it overwhelmed me.
Yeah, that's very unusual, right? Usually you're quite stoic about the whole thing. But you know, it takes a crisis like this to seem to bring out the very best in the people. And if you look at it, it's also very heartwarming.
Yes, indeed.
To know that we have people like that out there.
Indeed so. And I think it's very heartwarming to see Singaporeans stepping forward and showing their appreciation too. Like just over the weekend, or was it, there was a concerted, spontaneous effort to show to give applause and to show appreciation to our frontline workers. And I do see more visible shows of and expressions of appreciation and thanks to all our frontline workers. So that's truly very heartwarming. But I would say the best way that we can really pay tribute to them and show appreciation to them is for each one of us to uphold individual and social responsibility in abiding by the advisory, the guidelines that we have put out, and each one of us doing our part to help slow down the spread of the virus. So stay at home as much as you can, avoid contact with others, avoid unnecessary activities, and minimize contact with people outside of your immediate family members.
Right. In other words, do our part to give them as little work as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
You know, Mr. Wong, a lot of ordinary people like me get very curious about how decisions are made. Could you take us behind the scenes? Like, you know, when you people decide on something, is the decision made by you and Mr. Gan as the co-chairs? Is it made by the entire committee? Or does it go up to cabinet before certain decisions are made?
Well, there is a decision-making process internally within government. The task force which Kim Yong and I co-chair are empowered to decide on the critical public health measures. So we decide as a team, right? We have a team of ministers together with us on the task force, and each time we arrive at a decision, we keep the others in government updated on our decisions. So there is so because of the fact that so many things are moving quickly, that's why I say we are always in touch every day, discussing either virtually or in physical meetings, what are the key decisions that we have to take day by day. We are fortunate to have DPM Heng as our advisor, so he comes to attend our meetings quite regularly. He provides useful guidance, especially for major decisions that have to be made. But it's really a team effort.
So are there a lot of arguments and discussions? Does everybody just fall in line because the experts say, oh, this is very good, so everybody say, oh, right, let's implement that. Oh, this is not necessary. Oh, right, let's not implement that. So is that what happened? Or do you people actually argue it out?
Well, sure, there will always, and this is the you do want to see differences of views, and you do want people with different opinions to express them. And that's typically what would happen in our task force meetings, or even in our virtual sessions where we have a decision to make. There's data, there's evidence provided by the medical experts. But as I said earlier, we are not in a perfect world where evidence is 100%, expert opinion is unanimous, and then we say, okay, let's just proceed with the decision. All right? We are in a world where data is imperfect, things are changing so rapidly, and even expert opinion on many matters are divided and mixed. And so you have to make decisions and consequential decisions in this sort of uncertainty. So there will no doubt, under these circumstances, be different opinions, and it's good to have people express these different opinions, and we have a debate on what course of action to take, but eventually we converge on the decisions that have to be made.
So is it a consensus decision, or does somebody step in and say, look, this must happen and we are going to do it?
So regardless, it is a team decision, right? Whether or not there are mixed views, but eventually we all come together, and if we agree this is the decision that has to be made, we come together and agree as a team.
Right.
That's the way we go about doing things.
So this is the team of our future leaders.
Well,
yes. How important is economic impact when it comes to making these decisions? Or is it just human life that is looked at?
Our basis of making decisions has to be first and foremost from a public health perspective, doing what is right and necessary. Right? So that to me is the key priority. There will be economic consequences from these public health measures. But I think then we will have to just manage the economic impact rather than worry too much about the economic impact, and because of that, choose not to take certain important public health measures. Because if you think about this, if we decide not to do the public health measures, it doesn't mean there's zero economic impact.
Right.
The virus itself, if we do not have any public health measures, the virus itself will spread. People may still not want to go out on their own accord anyway. People will not travel, airlines will still be impacted. The economic impact will still be there regardless. Right? So the approach we take is look first and foremost at the public health measures from a public health perspective. Do what is right, do what is necessary to save lives, recognize the economic impact arising from these measures, and they are not trivial at all. I mean, if you talk about the latest set of safe distancing measures we put in, we do understand many people's livelihoods are impacted. We've closed many entertainment outlets. We've closed and suspended center-based tuition and enrichment classes. These are very painful for people running these businesses, and I fully understand. So we hope the business owners themselves do understand why it is necessary and why we have to make some of these difficult decisions in order to contain and slow down the spread of the virus. But separately, even as we have been deliberating over these measures, we have also been closely updating our colleagues in the Ministry of Finance who have been working on the second package.
Right.
And that's why they have also taken all this into account in coming up with the second package of measures which DPM Heng announced recently.
Yes, I think we're all very grateful for that. Was that perhaps the most difficult decision the team had to make, or were there other very difficult decisions that you had made over the last 2 months?
I think this past 2 months has been fraught with difficult decisions. It's like I said, we are dealing with so many issues almost on a daily basis. We had cruise ships. Should we take in a cruise ship? Should we not? How do you decide? And we had to deal with border controls. Initially, one country, China, then more countries. And it went country by country by country. Eventually, we had to close the borders for the whole world. It's a very major decision. And then you talk about safe distancing. Again, we started with just talking about large-scale events, controlling that. Then we went further from 250 to 10, from religious services allowing to continue with some precautions to full suspension of services, even private events like weddings and banquets. It's very disruptive to people's lives. But again, and all of these decisions happening in quick succession in a matter of days. So this is what we've been through. This is what the entire task force has been focused on, right? Every decision is a difficult one. We take it very seriously. We do not just do it hastily or in a knee-jerk fashion or blindly copy what others are doing, but we think through as much as we can what's the situation within Singapore, what are the risks, and what are the measures that are needed to manage and mitigate these risks. And we try to do all of this as proactively as possible.
Right. You know, there's a lot of confusion out there, and we're getting a lot of questions from our readers as well. What exactly is carrying on life as normal with precautions? What does it mean? For example, is it all right for me to go out with a few friends for a meal, or to invite them to my place for a private party? How about going shopping? I mean, if I'm not buying supermarket food, if I want to go out to get a new dress, is that all right? Because I noticed department stores have been promoting sales and things like that. So what does living life normally with precautions mean?
So it really depends on what phase we are through in this whole period, right? Because if you're talking about present time, we are implementing a set of moderate to high level of precautions in terms of safe distancing, where we tell everyone, like I said earlier, stay at home as far as possible. So under these circumstances, life as normal should mean minimizing contact with friends outside of your immediate family, not even lunches or dinners, even if it meets the requirement of less than 10. This is not the point, right? It's not about, oh, let's just find a group that is about 9, maybe 10 is just nice, and we just comply with the guidelines. The question is, do you need to, particularly during this time where we say we really want to reduce interactions with people in order to slow down the virus. So during this time, life as normal should mean stay at home as much as possible. As simple as that.
Yes, but then the restaurants are still open, the shops are still open. So you leave them open, which means people can go. So it's a bit of a mixed signal. So if you have them open, you mean we should be able to go, right? But then now you're telling me if you don't have to go, don't go. And usually these meetings with friends, you don't really have to go.
Yeah. So restaurants are open because people still do need to go out to eat. I say I'm staying at home more often, but I do go out to tapao food. I walk out from my home and I'll go to the food court nearby, I'll go to a hawker center and I'll buy food back. My lunch, I go to a Starbucks, I'll get a coffee, right? So I think that's fine. That's not going to cause about more transmission. You're going to a place to bring home, to buy packet food and then you bring back. But we're talking about social gatherings,
yes,
right? So going out to a shop, you may need to go to a pharmacy, you may need to buy something, some essential supplies, some food supplies, you may need to buy takeout. So fine, the shops are open for a purpose because people still need to go on living and they need to go and get supplies and then bring back home. But where it comes to activities with others, I would say keep it to a minimum and then stay at home as much as possible.
So, and if you do go out, try to make sure you've got a Tracer app.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, very much so.
You know, the government keeps talking about this being here for the long term. Okay, how long is long term? Are we all the measures are till end of April. Does it mean that by the end of April we should be able to be a bit more normal?
Well, this is one of the issues that I've been trying to communicate and let people know. There is no short-term fix for this. Because from time to time I've received feedback from Singaporeans on email, on my Facebook saying, why don't we go for more drastic measures? Let's do a lockdown for 2 weeks and reset after that, and life can go back as normal.
And your answer to that is?
What? unfortunately, that's not going to happen. There is no short-term fix that will cause us to reset back to a normal situation. It's just not going to happen. And it's not just unique to Singapore. If you look around the world, that's the reality. Even China is still in semi-lockdown mode after so long. The train system in Beijing is running at less than 30% of normal utilization rates. Right? Very few people are going out. The streets are empty. So even if we were to do more drastic measures, it doesn't mean that that will cause the problem to disappear after 2 weeks. So I've used the analogy that what we are looking at is a series of breaks that we can apply, but apply throughout the next 6 months to the end of the year or even longer. And you can calibrate the extent of the breaks, right? We are now at a perhaps moderate to high level where we apply more breaks under the set of measures that we say will continue till end April. If the situation is managed well by then, we could lift our foot off the pedal slightly, but not completely. We won't go back to zero. And then we would maybe go to a sort of a more moderate posture. But if it is not, if the cases still rise, unlinked cases still rise, and the situation, the conditions warrant it, then we will have to apply more pressure on the brakes and go for even more measures to help slow down the virus spread. And so that's where we will be for months, and we have to be mentally prepared and psychologically prepared for this. It is not just us in Singapore. It is literally the whole world in such a posture until we see better medical treatments, perhaps antiviral drugs that are now on clinical trials, or until vaccines are ready, which will only be by next year, not this year.
Right. Mr. Wong, that was so depressing. Okay, but unfortunately, that's also reality, the reality we are living in today. So you are saying essentially is, if the numbers continue going up, we probably will see more measures being implemented in Singapore. If the numbers come down and stay down, and if everybody does their part, that could happen. Some of the current measures may be lifted.
That's right. So for example, lifted but not going back to zero measures, right? So when I say lifted, we could, for example, talk about having religious services, but with precautions in terms of the number of people attending and in terms of the sufficient distance between the seats. Or we could have some private events, again, continuing, but with all the precautions. So those are the possibilities if you look at months ahead. But it's also possible, as I said, that we may need more measures, which will mean even tighter restrictions on people movement. Which way we will go, no one can predict. No one can predict, and it really depends on all of us doing our part. And we are looking at not only at headline numbers, because headline numbers are contributed by two sources, imported cases and local cases.
Right.
I think for the imported cases, with all the precautions we are taking now, they are ring-fenced, they are isolated, they are all right. So even if headline numbers were to go up for whatever reason, because more Singaporeans come back, that's not so much a concern because we are able to deal with that. We are focused more on local transmission, and we are focused also for local transmission, we're looking at unlinked cases because that's the worry, that these are cases that we are unable to trace the original source, the index case, and which suggests that carriers are still out there in the community, and potential hidden cases are still out there, which we are very concerned about.
Well, over the past few days, a few weeks even, the number of imported cases has been much higher than the number of local cases. Right, but recently I think the local cases has gone up a bit. So does it show that something isn't working properly here, or is it inevitable?
In a way, we have to give time for all that we have put in place to see effect, because the safe distancing measures, the very stringent set of safe distancing measures only came into effect last Friday. That's still too early, right? You need about 2 weeks to see any results, if at all. So all that we are seeing today is in fact the result of things that have already happened a week, 2 weeks ago. And it's not surprising that, that you see more local cases, because we had a wave of imported cases, and that's resulting in a corresponding increase in local cases
Oh, that was before you quarantined them?
That was before tighter measures were put in place. So now with the very tight measures, not just staying at home, but for the higher risk ones, we're putting them in dedicated facilities. I think that part is contained, but we have to now manage the local cases, the local transmissions.
So you're saying actually the reason we have had an increase in the local transmissions could be because they contracted the disease from someone who came back to Singapore with it?
That's right.
So,
I do think that if you look at the pattern, we had a first wave of imported cases from China, and then a series of local cases.
Yes.
Now we have dealing with a second wave of imported cases and a consequential wave of local cases as well. So that's the similar pattern.
So if you had, is there any pressure on Singapore to lock down the way other countries have done? Like, for example, Australia has closed its airports for 6 months. Now, if we had done that, then we wouldn't have had any imported cases. The local numbers would remain small, and then maybe life could have gone back to more or less normal.
Well, we have to be mindful that when we talk about imported cases, we're not just talking about foreigners. We're talking about Singaporeans coming back. So the decision is, what do we do with Singaporeans who want to return? Are we saying that they cannot come back to Singapore? I wouldn't want to make, I wouldn't want to do that to any Singaporean who wants to come back. So for Singaporeans returning, including permanent residents, we should welcome them. We understand many of them are anxious about the situation happening outside of Singapore, in their respective locations where they are residing now. They want to come back to Singapore. It's a place of refuge for them, and we see large numbers from US and the UK.
Yes.
Huge, thousands in a day. So we welcome them. I think that's the right thing to do. Welcome them, but then take all the precautions that's necessary to ensure that when they return, if there are any infected cases amongst them, they do not go on to spread to their family members or to other people within the community. So that's, like I said, a precaution that we have now put in place. Because of the large volume of returnees, finding dedicated facilities is very, very tough. Especially for Singapore, a small little island like Singapore. If we have a huge country, sure,
Not a problem, right? Yes.
You can easily find empty buildings else somewhere. But in Singapore, it's extremely hard. And that's why we've had to very quickly activate the hotels in order to provide accommodations, but also take all the precautions, working with the hotel staff to make sure that the staff are trained, they know what to do, proper infection control is taking place, so that these facilities do not end up being clusters in themselves.
Yes.
So these are all things that are happening. It's not something that just appears out of nowhere, that you can magically produce rooms for thousands of people a day, but a lot of work behind the scenes to get these facilities ready, and fortunately we are able to do so for US and UK returnees. We are working with more hotel operators to see how we can stand up, get ready, activate more facilities, because ideally I would like to be able to accommodate returnees from anywhere in the world.
How many people are we coming into Singapore every day?
Yeah, so
There's no way you can house all of them in isolation, is there?
So this is the challenge. We have 200,000 Singaporeans, at least, if not more, including PRs will be certainly more, overseas. Not all of them will come back at the same time. In fact, even for the Singaporeans in America and UK, the numbers have come down already. Yesterday I was looking at it, it's about 300 per day, now it's less than 200. So I think those who have decided to come back have come back. Those who've chosen to stay on will stay on. But if the infection and the virus spreads to other countries, other parts of the world, new epidemic centers may emerge, may well emerge. It's not over yet. You know, there's still a long way more for the virus to continue to spread to other continents, to other parts of the world. And if that situation turns out to be uncontrollable in any part of the world outside of Singapore, and if there are Singaporeans there, you can be sure a large number would now decide to say, look, maybe we should come back too. So we are trying our best to accommodate. I don't know if we can do it for everyone. So if we cannot, then the alternative is identify higher risk countries. And then for these higher risk countries, we put them in dedicated facilities. But for the rest, stay at home. And then we have to tighten up our enforcement to ensure full compliance even when someone is staying at home.
So the epicenter has moved from China to Europe and then now in the US. But what you're saying is if it moves to another country or another region, we may see another flood of Singaporeans coming back, and then we'll see another surge of cases because so many people are coming back at the same time. That's a possibility.
Indeed, indeed.
And you also mentioned earlier that some people on stay-home notice, I think you've now put in more strict penalties. Have there been people who have been breaching that, and is that what is causing some of these new unlinked cases?
It could be. I mean, no, we won't know. We know that there are breaches, and as when we have identified, when we see such breaches, we will not hesitate to prosecute them and to use the full force of the law to go after them. And we have highlighted some of these publicly as well. So we hope some of these public charges will serve as deterrents to anyone who would even contemplate wanting to do this.
All right, Mr. Wong, I think we are running out of time. So before we end, is there anything else you'd like to tell people out there or to ask them for their cooperation with?
Well, I go back to what I had said earlier, and we have been consistently saying the fight against COVID-19 is not something that the government alone can do. Every Singaporean has to be enlisted in this fight against the virus. It is so critical that we take this seriously and we all do our part to exercise our own individual social responsibility when it comes to safe distancing, when it comes to simple habits like washing our hands regularly, not using our hands to touch our faces, and also going to a doctor when we are unwell and not still going to work even when you have a sniffle. These may all seem like very simple things, but if we all do them well, collectively, they can be very effective in controlling the virus. So we are all in this together, and with SG United, we can beat the virus together.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Thank you so much for the time and for the insights you have shared. It certainly was an eye-opener for me. That's all the time we have today, but do keep up to date on the latest in the coronavirus pandemic in Singapore and around the world at straitstimes.com. And be sure to tune in to The Big Story every weekday at 5:30 p.m. I'm Salma Khalik. Goodbye and stay safe.